The committee room was silent, not the comfortable silence of routine oversight. This was the suffocating quiet that comes before a detonation. Senator Adam Schiff adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, and everyone who had watched him dismantle witnesses during Trump's impeachment trials recognized that gesture. It meant he had the evidence. It meant someone's career was about to end. FBI Director Kash Patel sat across from him, confident in his Navy suit, his FBI badge catching the harsh lights. He'd survived 3 hours of hostile questioning, but he didn't know what was coming. In exactly 74 seconds, one photograph and 3 simple questions would expose the biggest political purge in FBI history. And the trophy that proved it was all revenge. The 23rd of January, 2026, 3:47 p.m., Senate Judiciary Committee. The mahogany paneled chamber carried the weight of American justice. Schiff had spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment. His staff had worked with FBI whistleblowers, career agents who could no longer watch their colleagues purged for doing their jobs. They provided something unprecedented: internal communications, termination records, and one particularly damning photograph that Patel himself had posted on social media, thinking it proved his righteousness. The California senator knew exactly how to use it, but even he hadn't anticipated how quickly Patel would crumble. The hearing had been brutal from the start. Republican senators praised Patel's house cleaning of what they called corrupt FBI leadership. Democratic senators pressed him on mass firings 12 agents who knelt during George Floyd protests, dozens more connected to various Trump investigations. But throughout the marathon session, one explosive topic remained carefully avoided: the 23rd of January purge. Just hours before this hearing, news outlets had reported that Patel had forced out senior FBI leadership connected to 2 criminal investigations of Donald Trump. The special agent in charge in Atlanta removed. The acting assistant director overseeing the New York field office gone. A former special agent from New Orleans terminated. And in Miami, as many as 6 agents connected to the Mar-a-Lago search had been purged in a single day. Nobody had asked Patel about it directly until now. Have you ever felt like everyone else had it figured out except you? That is exactly how FBI agents felt every morning under Patel's leadership, wondering if today would be the day their careers ended for investigating the wrong people. But what happened next in that Senate chamber? That is what changed everything. At 3:47 p.m., Chairman Lindsey Graham recognized Senator Schiff for questioning. The room's energy shifted instantly. Political reporters who'd been half watching suddenly focused. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in. Everyone who'd followed Schiff's career knew what that calm expression meant. He was about to spring a trap that had been months in the making. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Schiff began, his voice carrying the measured calm of a federal prosecutor who'd built an airtight case. "Director Patel, I want to ask you about decisions made earlier today regarding FBI personnel." The mention of personnel decisions sent ripples through the chamber. This was the first direct question about the purge. Republican members shifted uncomfortably. Patel's expression remained carefully neutral, but trained observers noticed the micro-expressions. His jaw tightened. His hands moved from resting calmly to gripping the table's edges. "Senator Schiff," Patel replied carefully, "personnel decisions are made every day at the FBI based on operational needs, performance evaluations." But Schiff wasn't going to let him hide behind bureaucratic language. "Not today." "Director Patel, let me be very specific," Schiff interrupted, his voice sharpening. "This morning, you forced out multiple senior FBI officials: the special agent in charge in Atlanta, the acting assistant director in the New York field office, a special agent from New Orleans, and in Miami, as many as 6 agents all in one day. Is that correct?" The specificity was devastating. Patel couldn't claim ignorance or defer to staff decisions. Around the chamber, senators and staffers froze mid-motion. "Senator, I don't discuss specific personnel matters in open session," Patel responded, deploying the classic Washington evasion. "These decisions involve privacy considerations and Director Patel." Schiff interrupted again, his prosecutor instincts in full command now. "These aren't random personnel decisions. Every single one of these officials was connected to federal investigations of Donald Trump. The Atlanta agent worked on the election interference case. The New York office oversaw the classified documents investigation. The Miami agents participated in the Mar-a-Lago search. Isn't that correct?" The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in that chamber understood what Schiff had just done. He'd connected the dots publicly, on the record, forcing Patel to either confirm a political purge or commit perjury. Patel's face flushed slightly. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out, just a barely audible intake of breath that the sensitive chamber microphones picked up. This was the moment, the crack in the facade, but Schiff wasn't finished. What he pulled out next would end Patel's career. "Let me show you something," Director Patel, Schiff said, reaching into his folder with theatrical precision. He pulled out an 8x10 photograph and held it up so the cameras could capture it clearly. "Do you recognize this?" On every screen in America, viewers saw it, a bizarre metallic-colored 3D printed trophy featuring AF with a lightning bolt and dollar sign. A raised map of the United States sat on its base along with miniature buildings, and at the bottom, clearly visible, CR-15. The trophy Patel himself had posted on social media just one day earlier, calling it proof of FBI corruption. The trophy that was about to destroy him. Patel's expression changed instantly. The color drained from his face. His hands trembled slightly. He recognized what was happening. Schiff was about to use Patel's own social media post as evidence against him. "Senator, that photograph is from my social media account where I exposed corruption." "Yes, Director Patel, you posted this yesterday," Schiff confirmed, his voice now carrying absolute prosecutorial authority. "You called it a self-awarded trophy that proved the FBI under Biden was, in your words, a disease temple. You said this trophy was made by FBI officials to celebrate Operation Arctic Frost, the investigation into Donald Trump and his associates. You said it proved corruption. Is that correct?" Patel nodded stiffly. "Yes, Senator, that trophy represents the weaponization of the FBI against. And you disbanded TR-15, the unit that made this trophy. You fired everyone involved. Those are your words, correct?" "Yes," Patel said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. He could feel the trap but couldn't see how to escape it. "Director Patel," Schiff said, leaning forward with devastating focus. SCR-15 was the FBI's public corruption squad, the unit responsible for investigating government officials who break the law. And Operation Arctic Frost was a criminal investigation into potential crimes by Donald Trump related to attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Correct. The room erupted. Democratic members jumped to their feet. Republican members looked stricken. Reporters frantically typed. But Schiff continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "So let me make sure I understand your logic, Director Patel. FBI agents investigated potential crimes by Donald Trump. Those investigations led to criminal indictments. And your response was to fire everyone involved in those investigations and disband the entire public corruption unit. Is that accurate?" Pause for a second and think, what would you have done in Patel's situation? Hold that thought, because what he actually said next will either confirm your instincts or completely shock you. The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Patel looked around desperately. His attorney whispered something urgently, but Patel waved him off, a mistake that would haunt him forever. "Senator Schiff," Patel said, his voice barely controlled, trembling with suppressed rage, "you are deliberately mischaracterizing a complex situation involving agents who exceeded their authority, who pursued politically motivated investigations, who did their jobs." Schiff interrupted, his voice thundering through the chamber with an authority that shocked everyone present. "Director Patel, these agents followed evidence where it led. They obtained warrants from federal judges. They secured indictments from grand juries. They did exactly what FBI agents are supposed to do, investigate potential crimes regardless of who committed them, and you fired them. Not for misconduct, not for policy violations. You fired them because they investigated Donald Trump." The accusation was so direct, so devastating that it silenced the entire chamber. Republican senators who'd been preparing objections sat frozen. And Patel sat there with his mouth slightly open, unable to formulate any response. But Schiff had saved the knockout blow for last, the question that would end everything. "Director Patel, I'm going to ask you a very simple yes or no question," Schiff said, his voice dropping back to that calm, measured tone. "And I want you to think very carefully before answering, because you are under oath." The chamber held its collective breath. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on both men's faces in living rooms across America. Millions of viewers leaned forward. This was the moment. In the last 24 hours, did you fire, remove, or force out any FBI official who had not been involved in investigating Donald Trump? Schiff asked. "A single one." "Just name one FBI official you removed yesterday who had no connection to Trump investigations." "Just one." The question was brilliant in its simplicity. If Patel said yes, Schiff would demand proof, and there wasn't any. If Patel said no, he just admitted under oath that every single firing was connected to Trump investigations. And if Patel refused to answer, his silence would be even more damning. For 74 seconds time later, by journalists reviewing footage, Kash Patel struggled to respond. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked at his lawyers, but they had no answer for simple logic. He looked at Republican senators, but they were avoiding eye contact. senator, Patel finally managed. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. The specific operational decisions regarding individual personnel assignments involve complex considerations of, "You can't name one," Schiff said flatly. Not a question. A statement. "You fired every single FBI official connected to Trump investigations. Not because they did anything wrong, not because they violated policy, but because they investigated the man who gave you this job." At 3:48 p.m., exactly 74 seconds after Schiff's final question, the Senate Judiciary Committee chamber descended into complete pandemonium. Patel shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly, his face contorted with rage. "I will not sit here and be accused of political persecution by someone who weaponized impeachment," Patel screamed, his voice cracking. "Sit down, Director." Chairman Graham commanded, his gavel banging repeatedly. But the damage was done. The aftermath was immediate and catastrophic. Within minutes, video clips of the confrontation went viral. Patel can't name single firing unrelated to Trump trended with over 18 million mentions in the first hour. News networks played the 74-second exchange on loop. Legal experts across the political spectrum called it prosecutorial malpractice. "You can't disband the public corruption unit and fire everyone who investigated the president," noted former federal prosecutor Preet Bharara. "That is not law enforcement reform. That is obstruction of justice." But the real damage came from Schiff's devastating simplicity. He hadn't needed classified documents or whistleblower testimony. He'd used Patel's own trophy photograph and basic logic to prove political purge. The FBI Agents Association issued a statement within hours. Career agents conducted lawful investigations authorized by federal judges and grand juries. If those agents are now being fired for doing their jobs professionally, it represents a fundamental betrayal of law enforcement principles. 3 FBI agents who'd been purged that morning gave anonymous interviews describing how they'd been called into meetings with no warning, told their services were no longer needed, and escorted from FBI facilities by security. "We weren't given reasons." One agent told CNN, "We weren't accused of misconduct. We were just told to leave. And the only thing we all had in common was working on cases involving Trump." The human cost became clearer. These weren't political appointees. These were career FBI agents with decades of experience. The Atlanta special agent had 27 years. The New York acting assistant director had 31 years, all gone in a single day, all for one reason. Within 48 hours, multiple congressional committees announced investigations. The Justice Department Inspector General announced a comprehensive review, and calls for Patel's resignation came from both parties. But the most damning development came from inside the FBI itself. By the 25th of January, 7 FBI agents came forward as whistleblowers, providing congressional investigators with internal communications that proved the purge had been planned for weeks. Email chains showed Patel's office compiling lists of problematic personnel, agents whose only problem was investigating Trump. One email, leaked to the Washington Post, was particularly damning. Priority: identify all agents involved in Arctic Frost, Mar-a-Lago search, and J6 investigation leadership termination paperwork to be prepared confidentially. Execute all removals simultaneously to prevent coordination of resistance. The trophy itself became a bizarre subplot. Reporters tracked down the CR-15 agents who'd actually made it. Turns out it wasn't a self-awarded celebration of corruption. As Patel claimed, it was a retirement gift for a respected supervisor who'd led the unit for 15 years, created by agents as a lighthearted remembrance of cases they'd worked together. The AF didn't even stand for Arctic Frost. It stood for Accountability Forever, the unit's unofficial motto. Patel had taken a retirement gift, misrepresented its meaning, posted it as evidence of corruption, then used that false narrative to justify disbanding an entire FBI unit and firing everyone involved. When confronted with the trophy's actual origin, Patel's spokesperson claimed the director had been misinformed. But that excuse made things worse. It meant Patel had destroyed careers based on a misunderstanding, then refused to acknowledge his error. By mid-February, the pressure broke Patel in an unexpected way during a Fox News interview. Bret Baier asked, "If these agents you fired were corrupt, why haven't you charged any of them with crimes?" Patel's response was stunning. Corruption isn't always criminal. Sometimes it is about judgment, about priorities, about whose side you are on. The admission was played on every news network for days. Patel had just conceded that the agents he fired hadn't committed crimes. They'd simply investigated people Patel believed shouldn't be investigated. He'd admitted that whose side you are on was the criterion for FBI employment under his leadership. Constitutional scholars immediately recognize the danger. When the FBI director says loyalty matters more than law, noted Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe, we're watching the fundamental principles of rule of law collapse in real time. These agents had federal warrants, they had probable cause, they followed procedure, and they were fired for it. On the 18th of February, something unprecedented happened. 3 active FBI agents appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee to testify about the purge. They'd been granted whistleblower protections, but it was still extraordinary for current agents to publicly criticize their director, Special Agent Marcus Williams, a 23-year veteran who'd been fired from the Miami field office, provided the most damning testimony. I participated in the lawful execution of a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. Williams testified. That warrant was authorized by a federal magistrate judge who reviewed probable cause. We followed FBI protocols. Exactly. We documented everything. We behaved professionally. And 2 years later, I was fired for it. Not for misconduct, not for violating policy. I was fired because the subject of our investigation became president again and appointed an FBI director who considers investigating Trump to be corruption. Williams' testimony was particularly powerful because he wasn't political. He'd voted for Trump in 2016. He'd spent his career investigating drug cartels and terrorism. He'd simply been assigned to execute a lawfully authorized search warrant, had done so professionally, and was now being punished for it. The FBI Agents Association called for Patel's immediate resignation. Even some Republican senators began quietly suggesting he should step down, but Trump refused to fire him, and Patel refused to resign. By March 2026, FBI field offices were reporting serious operational problems. Agents were afraid to pursue sensitive investigations without political clearance. Prosecutors were declining cases because they couldn't trust the FBI's independence. Foreign intelligence services were reducing cooperation, concerned that shared information might be used for political purposes. The purge had broken something fundamental, the trust that allows law enforcement to function effectively. And through it all, that image remained: Adam Schiff holding up the trophy photograph, his voice calm but deadly, asking the question Patel couldn't answer. Political historians would debate whether this moment marked the beginning of Patel's downfall or simply the public exposure of a collapse that was inevitable. But everyone agreed on one thing: 74 seconds had changed everything. Not because Schiff revealed shocking new information. The firings were already public. The trophy photograph was already on Patel's own social media. But Schiff had connected them in a way that made the political persecution undeniable. He'd forced Patel to either defend the indefensible or admit the truth. And Patel had chosen panic, rage, and evasion that proved guilt more effectively than any confession. The long-term consequences for American law enforcement remained unclear. Would future FBI directors see Patel's purge as a cautionary tale? Or would they see his survival as proof that loyalty to the president mattered more than institutional integrity? The answer would shape the FBI for generations. But one thing was certain: Adam Schiff had drawn a line. He'd proven that political purges could still be exposed, that simple questions could still force accountability, and that sometimes one senator with one photograph and 74 seconds of airtime could do what months of investigations had failed to accomplish: make the corruption undeniable. The trophy that ended everything, not because it proved what Patel claimed, but because it proved what Schiff exposed: the transformation of federal law enforcement from an institution that investigates crimes to an institution that protects power. And 74 seconds was all it took to show America what that transformation looked like.